Hi everyone, welcome to Science Friday with the Trustees. I'm Molly, the island's education manager here on Martha's Vineyard. The Trustees is Massachusetts' largest conservation and preservation organization with 118 properties throughout the Commonwealth. For today's lesson, we will be learning about salt marshes and the importance of salt marshes. This lesson is designed for elementary and middle school age students, but can be enjoyed by all. So for the activity for today's lesson, you will need a few materials. You'll see I have this big Tupperware in front of me. So the first thing you'll want is a Tupperware. It does not have to be as big as mine, but some bin that you will be able to put things in. So a Tupperware or a bin. Then you'll want some sand or dirt that you can put inside of your Tupperware. Next, a sponge an old sponge that you can cut up into some smaller pieces. And then you'll want a spare block of wood or just a piece of scrap wood. And finally, for today's activity, some small figurines or little play people. So if you have little Lego people or things that you've put together with Legos, or any sort of small toy cars that you'll be able to put within your bin or Tupperware that will be filled with sand. So those are all the materials that you'll need today. So for today's lesson, we are going to answer three main questions. The first question, what is a salt marsh? Second question, why are salt marshes important? And the third and final question, what is threatening the health of salt marshes? Let's start with our first question for today. What is a salt marsh? Have you seen a salt marsh before? I'll describe one and see if you can think of a salt marsh in your own community. Let's begin by breaking our two words down, salt and marsh. So salt water, and marsh, marshy since the soil is made up of deep mud and peat. Peat is a decomposing plant matter or plant matter that's breaking down. It's usually several feet thick and it's root-filled and spongy. So that's important to remember that peat is spongy. Can you see where the peat is in the marsh in these two photos? Especially in the photo that's a little bit more zoomed in. So salt marshes are coastal wetlands. They are located in coastal areas where the land meets salt or brackish, a mix of fresh and salt water. Salt marshes are flooded and drained by salt water brought in by the tides. They are flushed by the tides as water from the ocean rises and then recedes or moves back. During high tide, the marsh is flooded with salty water from the ocean. Salt marshes are found on the coast in protected areas, like at the edge of an estuary, or where a freshwater river or stream meets the sea. Salt marshes are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth. So based on what I've just described, can you think of a salt marsh in your own community? Here's a picture of a salt marsh on Martha's Vineyard in Cape Pogue Wildlife Refuge. Now on to our next question. Why are salt marshes important? To start with, salt marshes provide nursery ground for juvenile fish and other marine species, such as crabs. Now, a salt marsh may only look like it is nothing but grass, mud, and water. However, many animals live in this productive area. The salt marsh provides food and protection from predators and storms for many, many marine animals. Organisms living in the salt marsh have adapted or learned to survive in a tidal habitat. Because of the daily tides, so the water coming in from the ocean to that salt marsh and back out again, and changes in rainfall and other seasonal changes, the plants and animals of the marsh experience changes in salinity, so the amount of salt, temperature, and air exposure. If you've ever visited a salt marsh, you may have seen ribbed mussels that are there just on the edge of the marsh, stuck into the peat. The next time you go to a salt marsh, see if you can find a ribbed mussel. Salt marshes also protect shorelines from erosion. They'll buffer wave action and help trap sediment. Salt marshes act like a sponge by absorbing extra water and in turn reducing flooding. Salt marshes can slow storm surges, so really intense storms. They can slow these down by absorbing much of the water before it floods further inland. Salt marshes are also important carbon sinks. So salt marshes and other coastal wetlands serve as these carbon sinks, which means they hold carbon that would otherwise be released into the atmosphere and contribute, in not a good way, to climate change. Salt marshes also filter both surface water and groundwater, and in this way, they help prevent water pollution from runoff, so any nutrient pollution that's coming from the land into the water. So now for our final question. What are the threats to salt marshes? First is coastal development. So a lot of natural salt marshes have been filled in and changed in order to provide room for housing and development along the coast. Pollution, so too many nutrients coming from the land, like phosphorus and nitrogen, flow into the marsh. Now, earlier we said salt marshes are great filters of these types of pollution, but if there's too much of it, so if the marsh is overloaded with all of these nutrients, this is not good for the marsh. And then finally, climate change. Climate change is causing the sea level to rise. With rising sea levels, we will lose environments like salt marshes. So as sea level rises, we lose coastal habitats at a fast rate, and the salt marsh will not have time to adapt. Remember, a salt marsh is used to being flooded with the incoming tide and then that tide receding or moving back out. So what happens when that water doesn't leave the marsh? The higher water level will cover the lower part of the marsh for longer periods of time, and in turn drown the salt marsh grass. This salt marsh grass is very important as it holds the marsh sediment together with its roots and provides shelter to juvenile fish, shellfish, and crabs. So marine species rely on this marsh for at least one part of their life cycle. As the salt marsh dies off, these coastal animals will lose their habitat, reducing their survival rate. Okay, so I've moved outside to do our activity because it is going to get a little bit messy with some water in this bucket. So at this point, you should have your Tupperware or bin. Again, it can be smaller than mine. That's perfectly fine. And then some sand or dirt within your bin. Along with that, you should have your sponges cut up into some smaller pieces, and then these figurines or Lego pieces, anything that you have at your house, a block of wood, and then also you will want to get a pitcher of water, and we'll pause the video to give you time to get that pitcher in a minute. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do, you can see this all, is take your sand that you, if it looks like as mine does in this Tupperware, move it all to one side of the Tupperware. Okay, so clear one side of the Tupperware free of most of the sand, doesn't have to be all of it or your dirt. This sand is our land, our coastal environment, and this side of the Tupperware is going to be water or the ocean. So we'll form our land over here. And what we're going to do is make a little river going through our land. So with your hands, dig out a small river here. And just move that sand up to the sides of your land so that you have this river. And if you remember from earlier, we're also forming here an estuary. So this area is the estuary where the ocean is coming in to a river or stream here that's coming from land. So we have a river more or less formed here, two sides of land, and an estuary. Okay, now let's take some of our sand and make a small island in front of our river. I have my small island here in front of the river. Doesn't have to be perfect, just have fun playing with the sand and dirt in this box a little bit and get it set up with your land, your island, and your river. Okay, now I think we are ready for the next step, which is to take our small figurines. I have a truck, the Statue of Liberty here, and we can put them, I'll put the Statue of Liberty here on the island, and just put them on your land. So all of our coastal land is going to be developed here with buildings and trucks and motorcycles and all sorts of stuff. So just place your little figurines anywhere on your land. I have quite a few of them. You don't need to have as many as you see here. Maybe we'll put the motorcycle out on our island as well. Okay, so now you are ready for water. So you can pause the video right now and go get a big pitcher of water. Okay, now you should be back with your pitcher of water. Before you put any water in your Tupperware, you want to take your sponges and line just one side of your coastal land here with your sponges. So you might not need a ton. I'm just going to use these 3 here and just line them. These sponges are going to represent our salt marsh. So this side of the coast has a salt marsh in front of the land, and this side does not. And our island doesn't either. So once you have your sponges in here, you'll take your pitcher of water and you'll start to fill your Tupperware on the ocean, this other side of the Tupperware. Now take a look as I'm filling this. Take a look at that island. What's happening there? And also on each side of the coast. So we're seeing, I'm filling and filling. I'll take a break with the water. But look closely here. We had the water flooding this side of the coast. You can see the dark spots here. And then look on this side. What are our sponges doing? They're absorbing that water. Our island is getting very, very wet. So we'll add some more water here. We're seeing some erosion on this island, definitely. Okay, that's all my water out of my pitcher. So I'm going to go refill my pitcher, and you can keep pouring in the rest of your water, or also go get a refill as well. Okay, I'm back with some more water. So let's add a little bit more water to our side of our Tupperware. And keep a close eye on that land, on our river, island. What is happening to my Tupperware here, to our land? I'll just keep filling it in. The island. The water's coming up around the island. Okay, I'll stop pouring the water in now. Now take your wooden block or any little piece of wood that you have. You can also use your hand if you want to. And let's start to make some waves, because remember, this is the ocean. So I'm going to start to gently make a few waves in my bin. And let's see. Oh, the Statue of Liberty has fallen on our island, and it looks like our motorcycle is going down. The island is not in good shape. So here are just some gentle waves. How are we doing on this side versus this side? Something to look at. Look at all this sand here that's been pulled down from the water. So it's being eroded and washed away towards the ocean. Whereas on this side, with our salt marsh, like a sponge, we're not seeing that as much, right? So think about, how is our community doing on the land here behind the salt marsh versus without the salt marsh. And now I'm going to do a few bigger waves. We're getting to hurricane here. It looks, our island is pretty much gone. It's been washed away by the ocean. Oh. And what's happening over here? We're losing this building. We've lost a lot of the land on this side. While on this side, with our sponge, our salt marsh, our trucks and little figurines are much more protected. So what this is showing us is that this marsh is really important, especially as we are going to see an increase in extreme weather and hurricanes and bigger wave action. We are going to need to rely on our sponge-like salt marsh to help protect the land and our coastal communities. Because without the salt marsh, you lose a lot of that land that's developed here. Like, we've lost this house here and our island right in the middle. So you can have fun with your bin of doing another activity in it, and it might be a little bit different now that your sand is wet, but you can make a new river or two rivers and move your sponges around and see what happens when you introduce that water and make some waves. Are you noticing the same thing, or is anything different? And see if that salt marsh continues to protect that coastal community. Okay, at this point, make sure when you're done with your activity that you clean this all up, and you can dump your water and dirt or sand outside somewhere that your parents say you are able to dump it, and you might need to ask them for a hand to do so. So thank you for joining me and following along with our lesson on the importance of salt marshes. I hope that you learned a lot and you were able to have some fun as well. Make sure you share this lesson with family and friends and other classmates. You can find other online activities and lessons at thetrustees.org/@home. The Trustees, since we're a nonprofit organization, we rely on people just like you and your family and friends for support. So with that in mind, I really encourage you to become a member of the Trustees, or to renew your membership, or to donate. and you can do so by simply going to thetrustees.org/join us. I look forward to seeing you next time.